Welcome back to another episode of Novelio. Today is Tuesday, May 18th, 2021. I'm going to continue on with my reading of Hot Winter Sun. Jennifer had told Clarissa of Catherine's return and asked her to avoid her for just a few days until she was through the worst of it. Dr. Lincroft had stated he thought the excitement of knowing her siblings were at the manor might be too much strain on her heart. Instead, Catherine was told only that they were safe and well and would be brought to see her as soon as possible. Clarissa was ecstatic and swore to do what Jennifer had asked. It was a bit more challenging to convince Matthew to do the same, but in the end he agreed. Later that night, Sarah went to Luce to get someone, as Catherine seemed to be in the throes of fever and was calling for her late husband. "Begging your pardon, sir, but I am not sure if Mistress Catherine be needing the doctor. She seems distressed, my lord. She be calling for your brother," Luce said, lowering her eyes. "I'll go up," replied Jennifer. "Thank you, Luce." Julian rose as well, and Jennifer almost told him to remain behind, but quickly realized it would be useless. "Try not to appear hysterical, Julian, even if you are concerned. Remember that Oscar did say she may have numerous moments of delirium, and that it is very common." When they entered the room, Jennifer could see from the doorway that Catherine's color was high, and she was restless. She took her hand, saying her name. "Jennifer, you must help me." "What is it, dear?" Jennifer said. Julian was not far behind her when Catherine's gaze fell on him. Suddenly a smile illuminated her face, and Julian thought it made her more beautiful than ever. "Robert, I couldn't find you. I knew you'd come back to me," she cried and clung to Julian's hand. "All this time you must have been close, and I was the one who was lost. Tell me you still love me, my darling." "I love you, Catherine," Julian replied with a haunted look that belied his light tone. "Well, I am telling no lies." "Don't leave me, then. Stay with me." "I'll never leave you, sweetheart." Julian sat down on the bed, and Jennifer quietly slipped from the room. He could not tear himself from Catherine's side, although she did not say very much, and what she did say made little sense. At one point she asked, "How fares Rupert today?" He gave a reassuring but neutral reply, wondering to himself who was Rupert. "Immediately I speculate this Rupert is someone who's captured her heart. The only way I will ever rest easy is to make her my wife. But how can I even begin to approach that topic now? I must learn that age-old art of patience instead, and I fear I will not learn it well." He stayed with her until she slept, and for quite some time after. Within a day, Catherine's fever broke, and although she remained weak, she made good progress. One afternoon she heard voices coming from outside and crept down the hall to look out the east window. She was always fearful her father may return now that she was back at Briarwood. Suddenly she heard Julian's voice behind her. "Kathy, love, you shouldn't be out of bed this way." "I know," she sighed, "but I had to look out the window. I wanted to make sure my father was not here." "Catherine," Julian said with exasperation, "you are fixated on this man." "I'm not fixated, I'm frightened." "But there's no need. He cannot harm you here. However, this unhealthy obsession, as Robert once called it, will eventually harm you if you keep on this way." "Robert said that?" "Yes, and I believe he was right, as he always was about things in this life. He would be happy to know you are here," he added. "I would give anything to have him back, Julian." "And I too, sweetheart," he said sincerely, "but he shall live on in this child. What a comfort that will be to all who loved him." He pulled her back toward her room and said she should return to bed before she found herself chilled. "I wonder if I'll get a boy," she said. "If God answered my prayer and gave me a boy, I would know it was right to return." "Catherine, be it a boy or a girl, it was absolutely right to come back to those who love you." Meanwhile, Carissa taught both children with great success, and the household marveled at how she could use old books from the manor's schoolroom and create the appropriate lessons for a boy and a girl of completely different ages. They rarely tried to avoid her, as so many youngsters did with governesses. Some days they even looked forward to what they would learn next. Nevertheless, on this particular day, Matthew had developed a rebellious streak and decided he would hide in another part of the manor, rather than settle down for the day's teaching session. Carissa guessed that it may have had something to do with the fact that it was an arithmetic lesson. Suddenly, while creeping along a hall he did not usually venture through, he thought he heard Catherine's voice. He watched as one of the maids left the room and then went down the hall and peeped in. A few moments later, Catherine saw her door move slightly, and then suddenly, in one fluid motion, Matthew tiptoed over and crept onto the bed. Kathy, you are really here. I was starting to wonder if it was true or not. When are we going to be allowed to visit you proper? He demanded. I am tired of waiting, so I'm not going to anymore. Matthew! What? Where did you come from? In an instant her eyes took in his appearance, his clothes, and his healthy, glowing complexion. He was clearly living at Briarwood, and for more than a few days. She gathered him tightly in her arms, as if she would never let go. You are staying here? She looked at him incredulously, waiting for an answer. Yes, Master Julian brought me here after Clarissa came. Clarissa is here? You are both here, living at the manor? When? For how long? How did it happen? Catherine, who was rarely tongue-tied, felt as if she could not speak fast enough to satisfy herself. We weren't supposed to shock you with the news because it might stop your heart and kill you, so we stayed away, Matthew said, and Catherine burst into laughter, ruffling his fair hair that made him look so much like Christopher. Well, that's cutting right to the quick of it, she replied, almost giddy with happiness, but her heart was indeed pounding. Just then the door opened and shut a second time, and Clarissa was standing before her, looking happy and fearful at the same time. Matthew, she said almost in a whisper, Julian is going to have your hide. Then suddenly she ran over the bed and fell upon her sister. Oh, Kathy, it was so hard to stay away, but I can't think what Julian will say. The doctor didn't want you to have too much of a shock and thought we'd catch your fever. Julian didn't seem to care if he caught it, though. Catherine was almost too overwhelmed to speak, and greedily drank in the sight of her sister, looking well, healthy and sumptuously clad in a dark yellow gown that set off her russet hair to perfection. We thought you didn't send us a message when you left, but Carissa told us that you did, Clarissa said. Of course I did. I might have known he'd never let it get to you, and I... Suddenly Sarah was there. You little imps! You weren't to disturb her. Lord Julian will be in a fine state when he realizes you're here. Now go scuttle away before he feeds you to the dragon. Matthew burst out laughing then and said, There is no dragon. I peeped in to look, and there is nothing there except feed for the horses. He was referring to a small storage shed on the property in which Sarah insisted was a dragon whenever Matthew misbehaved. All at once Catherine looked up to find Julian in the doorway, at which Sarah quickly ushered the two younger ones from the room. Ah, I knew the little devils would not stay away, but Oscar thought your heart wouldn't sustain any great shock or strain while you're still ill. Julian, you are an angel, she said, reaching for his hand. That's the second time I've been called an angel in 2 months' time. I fear I shall soon hear lightning from heaven if I'm constantly compared to angels, he said jocularly, while relishing the feel of his hands in hers. Oh, please don't be angry with them. Matthew couldn't restrain himself, and Clarissa followed, as I suppose she guessed what he was up to. Please tell me how it all came about. Robert must have told her if things became unbearable to come to the manor, and this she did one night and was mistaken for a thief. While I investigated the commotion, I discovered it was Clarissa. She was installed here from then on as a member of the family. Shortly thereafter we retrieved Matthew. I will have to tell you that story as well. He trailed off evasively. Blake has now been driven off the property entirely. Have I made you happy, sweetheart? How can you even ask that? And moreover, how could I ever repay you? I owe you more than I could return in a lifetime. I would shine your shoes if you wanted, she said, tears filling her eyes. You owe me nothing, he replied immediately. You said that to me once before, she said softly. Don't remind me of that day, he said, looking away to the window. The day you left, one of the saddest in my life. He turned to her again and said, But you're back now, and these children are a blessing to our home. We shall soon have Robert's child as well. The scales are even, if you must think of it that way. You've given me far more than I've ever given you. Oh, Julian, they look so healthy and happy. Yes, and Carissa has taken on the task of educating them, although I was perfectly willing to hire a governess. She seemed to take an immediate interest in the task, and I thought it would be good for her. Catherine nodded, thinking it was exactly what Carissa needed. It took a bit of manipulating, however, to make Clarissa think of an education as a suitable way to earn her room and board. You Trefellners can be quite stubborn, it seems, Julian said, thinking Catherine's smile was nothing less than dazzling. Please let them visit me, Julian. I promise I won't let them exert me. How can I deny you anything? Julian said with defeat, yet he was still smiling as he left her room. Clarissa and Matthew were in between their morning lessons and the evening's review of them one day and decided to visit Catherine and show her their progress. Matthew then told her a story that got wilder as it went along, until the girls were laughing feverishly, and eventually Julian tapped on the door, and when he entered said, "It sounds as if a riotous party is underway in here, and I must ask why I wasn't invited." "You are always invited to everything," Matthew declared, "because things are always more interesting when you are around." This greatly amused Julian, and Matthew went on to tell him several of his best tales. "You'll have to excuse him, Julian," Clarissa said, rolling her eyes. "He fancies himself a great entertainer, when really he is only a source of annoyance." At this the two adults could not hold back their laughter. "Kathy, when are you going to have the baby?" "We're all very tired of waiting," Matthew asked. Catherine smiled and said, "You will have to wait and see." "I wonder if it will look like you or Master Robert." Catherine fumbled for an answer, then feeling that old stab of grief at the mention of Robert, and finally said, "I hope he looks like his father, but I suppose we must wait and see about that too." "It's late, Matthew," Clarissa said suddenly. "Let's go find Carissa and see if we remembered anything from this morning." After the children left, Julian sat down on the bed and picked up Catherine's hand. "I'm so sorry, Kathy," he said, feeling her emotion at the children's innocent words. "I think some days I am surviving this and am beginning to be happy again, and then a dream or a memory or a scent brings it all back, and I'm standing in the hall once more and Sarah is telling me he is dead. I still don't know how to live without him," she said at length, fighting desperately to restrain the emotion within her, and Julian was equally as desperate to offer comfort. "You must think of the child. Robert is not lost to us, either of us. Not with the child on the way." He told her about his visits to Simon Shores, how close he felt to Robert when he walked or rode along the rocky path. "But if this child should be lost, I know I would not survive, and I am not strong, Julian. You must know that. I've been told of your heart and the fever when you were a young girl, but here you have the best of everything. Even Dr. Lincroft said there is no reason to think that the baby will be lost, so don't entertain dark thoughts. I know you'll have a healthy son or daughter, and the child will be Robert's heir, and one day all this will belong to him or her." Catherine smiled, regaining her composure, and he knew he had somehow stumbled on the correct thing to say. He thanked God again for the baby, shuddering to think how she might view her life without the child to make it worth living. "You mustn't upset yourself overthinking everything, though," Julian said. "Yes, I know. It might as well be said that I will not survive another illness. I must not be foolish. Everything must go well." Just then Sarah came into the room with Jennifer. "I see you have decided not to listen to the doctor and insist on pestering our patient," Jennifer said. "I was invited, sister," Julian replied, smiling. "Well, now you are uninvited," Jennifer said firmly, as Sarah set Catherine's medicine on the nightstand and left the room. "Well, I must take heed, as well as we all know my sister can breathe fire at unexpected moments," Julian said. "But I've been meaning to ask you, Catherine, where did you go when you left me?" "Don't be angry, Julian," she cried. "Nay, sweetheart, I promise I'm not. But images come to my mind that I cannot ignore. Please tell me how you survived. What you had to resort to." "Not what you are thinking. I did nothing to disgrace your family's name." "No matter what I say, you make me sound like a monster." "You are," she said, smiling. "You make me happy," he laughed. "I deserve those retorts." She then told him about Monique and Gerard and Rebecca. She spoke to him of Rupert and Charlotte, and even of the dogs and peacocks. He never ceased to be amazed at how she could transplant him to another place as if he were there himself. His mind's eye saw the peacocks as they strutted around, indulging in the peas they so loved, and the dogs scurrying around Catherine's feet for a bit of affection, and even the sun dropping behind the vineyard, casting shadows on the acres. How she could make him picture everything so vividly. I always wondered how Rupert and Charlotte's wedding went, and if they will ever make it here as they hoped, although they certainly won't come now. After hearing the story, Julian was relieved to know that the mysterious Rupert she inquired about when her fever ran high was far away in France and likely now married. "How fortunate that you met that kind young man when you did." "Yes, if ever it was the Almighty leading one to church, it was that day. I'm just sorry I never had the chance to pay my respects to my aunt before she died, and be with her in the end. If I had left immediately, I might have seen her before she passed." "How could that be if she died months before?" Julian asked, puzzled. "Oh, it couldn't have been that long," replied Catherine. "Otherwise, how could she have sent for me?" "You received a message?" he asked hesitantly. "I thought you just set out to go to her." "No, of course not. I was about to, but then a message came that she was asking for me. I guess she was finally responding to the letter I sent from Italy when Robert and I first married." However, Julian knew from what the detective had said that Catherine's aunt was gone even then. Yet when you arrived, it was to find her dead. "Did anyone tell you how long she had been deceased?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "No," Catherine replied. "It was just a young girl sweeping the steps who had moved there with her family a short time before. All she knew was that she had died. I likely never will know exactly when, as the sexton made a mistake on her cross and marked it April, but that couldn't be, as she sent for me well after that. I should have investigated further, I suppose, but there seemed no point. Why?" "Oh, nothing particular," Julian said. "I was just thinking of a message coming and then her being gone so soon after. What a terrible run of bad luck." He hoped his voice betrayed no other suspicion and continued to hold light conversation with Catherine, but this new information disturbed him. "Julian, stop interrogating the girl," Jennifer finally broke in, giving Catherine a chance to try the medicine, at which she wrinkled her nose in distaste. "Very well," Julian replied. "I will leave for now, but I shall return." "I have no doubt of that," said Jennifer, grinning at Catherine. Later, alone in his study, Julian paced the floor, puzzled and uneasy about the supposed message from Catherine's aunt. He remembered distinctly how Ernest said she had been dead for what was now nigh on a year, yet a message had come. What disturbed him so much was from whom and why. Ernest arrived the next day, and Julian explained the situation to the detective. "Pray tell, how does a dead woman send a message?" Julian demanded. "It appears there was indeed mischief afoot. Perhaps someone purposely attempting to lead her astray." "Who would play such a trick?" asked Julian. "Some crazy mischief on her father's, perhaps, yet even that seems incongruous." "I will attempt to discover it if you like," he replied, reading Julian's thoughts. If that was the case, whoever it was not there when she arrived, most likely because it would be impossible to predict exactly when a person would receive a message, prepare to leave, and reach the destination. Even anticipating it wrong by a day may have given her the chance to come and go before whoever lured her there, if anyone did, would realize she had come. "I must ask you to get to the bottom of it, Ernest. I have no one else to turn to, and I can't just ignore facts that point to a deeper problem than a misconstrued message. I do not lean to paranoia, but I have a strong feeling there is more to this than meets the eye."